Hello YouTubers, in this special bonus video I'm going to tell you how you can make your own decals, or is it decals? I'm not sure, I'll let you decide. I wasn't going to upload this until the weekend. You've probably had enough of me for 1 week, but I've had a number of requests for people about how to make their own decals and felt it best not to wait any longer. Anyway, before I launch into my script, I just wanted to say thank you to all of the people who have supported my channel and provided me with words of encouragement. In all honesty, I'm a bit of a private sort of a guy, and the idea of plastering my mug all over the net didn't really appeal to me. But in my life, I've always been driven by a wish to help others. Yes, there's plenty of people out there that do not need my help. They can probably build models to a better standard than me. But there's also a lot of people who perhaps feel daunted or underconfident to tackle a model build and would really love to get into this great hobby. And frankly, that's where I come in. I've planned this series of videos in detail for the novice, and I really don't know how they would be received. I have to say I've been pleasantly surprised. I've had lots of messages of encouragement and feedback that what I'm doing is of benefit. So you'll be pleased to know I'm fired up and I ain't gonna stop now. Okay, after that from the heart bit, let's get back to the video content. Here's some of my homemade decals. So, in order to make your own, you'll need the following: a computer and a design program such as Photoshop or GIMP or Affinity or a Mac equivalent, a printer, and one of 2 types of special printing paper which are not expensive and they're freely available off the net. You might also need a small can of acrylic lacquer spray which you can get from places like Halfords. The beauty of creating your own decals means you can replace existing faded or damaged items or create your own new brand, but most of all you can be unique, plus it's satisfying and rewarding. I mentioned there's 2 types of paper you can use, and they have different properties. The first one is what they call water slide paper. Water slide is a thin film sheet on top of a water removable paper backing. What you'd call the typical transfer, as you've probably seen on most plastic model kits. You basically print on a high quality setting. You spray it with a couple of coats of lacquer to seal the paint against water bleed, because bearing in mind you're going to have to soak it in water to get the top layer off the bottom. You wait for a couple of hours for the ink or lacquer to harden, soak it in water for 3 to 5 minutes, and then slide the transfer off onto your model. Hey presto. The positives are you've got a clear background, although you can have a white background if you prefer. They look very realistic when dry. They look almost painted because they are ultra thin. The paper's cheap to buy and you can get results very quickly. You can start 8 o'clock in the morning and by 11:30 you've got all your decals done. The negatives: they are fragile and delicate. They need care when you're applying to avoid tearing or distortion, and being so thin, the printed colour overlay can be affected or tinted, if you like, by the colour underneath. And remember, with these you will need to spray with lacquer to avoid the paint bleeding when you soak it in water. Numero 2, glossy self-adhesive. Think of this like photo paper, normal photo paper, but it's got a self-adhesive backing to it. It's usually a white background. It looks just like photo paper. As I say, self-adhesive on the back. Print using a high quality setting, wait a couple of hours for the ink to set properly, cut it out, peel the backing off, stick it on your model. Job done. The positives are it's easier to fit than water slide, and you don't get colour bleed from anything underneath, you know, that kind of a strong background colour. The negatives, well, it has a white background which may not suit your colour scheme. For example, if you've got a red background, you're going to see the white background of your image. You can cut close to your design so that the white doesn't show, but this may be difficult on a complex design. Alternatively, in your design suite, you can set the background colour to that of your model. That way you don't have a white background. The background is the colour of your model. Both types of paper are readily available on the net and they're not expensive. The water slide paper, I use Halford's acrylic lacquer, which is about £8 for a tin, and it lasts for ages. And finally, a word about design. Perhaps the hardest part, and it would depend on your skill set, is the design of your artwork. In the first place, you'll need to measure your model accurately to the millimetre to ensure the scale and overall size of artwork is correct. You will most likely also need to do a test print to ensure the printed colour is what you want. I don't know about you, but if you've ever done any colour printing, you'll know that what you see on your computer screen doesn't always come out the same on paper. Not everybody's got a colour corrected monitor. For these reasons, I only print my own decals. If for you designing is a problem, you may be able to get a friend to help you. I have seen people on the Facebook group pages offering their services. Please be aware that complex design work can take a long time to get right, and I would suggest you try to keep your designs simple, if only to avoid spending hours at the PC. I'll just run you through printing a self-adhesive decal. This one's been done on Evergreen Goods glossy white photo paper, 100 GSM A4 inkjet and laser paper. To all intents and purposes it just looks like a normal glossy photo paper, but it has two layers. The back layer peels off and leaves a front layer with adhesive, so you can peel the back off and just stick it onto your shop. I'm just opening Photoshop here. I've just got part of a previous decal that I've made, and what we're going to do is we're just going to run through printing this. So I'm going to file print. Got my Canon printer switched on already. I'm just going to print it at the top of the paper there. So I've got a piece of A4 in, but it's only about half a sheet. There's no need to waste it. You can use other bits of it. In terms of your print settings, as I said earlier in the video, photo printing, high quality, which is what I've got those set to. So we're all set now. All we need to do is hit the print button. Just now hit the print button. And there you go. There's your logo. This ink dries relatively quickly. I mean, frankly, you could probably work with it more or less straight away, but I recommend you leave it for a couple of hours. Just allows the ink to go solid. I have found if you try and use it beforehand that you'll end up fetching some of the ink off with your fingerprints and things like that. So in a moment we'll chop it up and we'll wait a couple of hours and then we'll stick it onto something. What I have here is my option 2, which is a self-adhesive decal. There's a peel off piece on the back. I don't have a model to show you at the moment. This is just a test. So I've just got a piece of pretty flat card here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut first off fairly close around the outside of this because you don't want too much of the outside showing on it, and then I'm going to show you it fitted on there in the end. So let's cut off the paper. I'm making a very quick job of this. I normally take just a little bit more care. I don't want to bore you sitting there watching me cutting out a piece of paper. So there we go. Let's assume you've cut around that nice and carefully, not like I have, and there that's ready to go. Getting these two to split can sometimes be a bit of a faff, but they do come apart. If you haven't got a nail to pull them apart, a good idea is to use, there we go, a good idea is to use a knife very, very carefully and peel it back. Now here's a colling tip, so that you get it exactly where you want it. Start by taking a small piece off. Use your scissors, just chop off that piece, like so. Just put it back down again. Okay? This is where you need to carefully position it, keeping the bit that's sticky off the end. So just get it exactly where you want in terms of the angle. Let's assume you want it at that angle there. There we go. And you want it in that position there. So I've got it exactly where I want it now. Just hold that where it is and just firm down the bit on the other side. What you do then, lift it up, peel the paper up and slowly push it down, keeping it in a line as you go till it comes off completely. That way you don't get any air bubbles in it at all. And there you go, voila, one decal. You'll notice you can see the outline on it. That's a sort of, could be considered a minor drawback, but I think personally it's outweighed by the ease of doing these, which is a lot easier than doing the water slide ones, which I'm going to show you next. Okay, we're going to now look at what was option 1, which is the water slide decal. That's actually got a paper backing to it, and the front of it is some sort of a fine plastic. I've put 2 coats of lacquer on it. A couple of things about the lacquer. Firstly, health and safety. It does give off a bit of an odour, so make sure it's well ventilated. Make sure it's warm before you use it, because it'll block the nozzle otherwise. I tend to put mine by a radiator for an hour or something just to warm it up. It doesn't have to be hot, but just warm it up. When you spray 9 inches away and just a couple of light coats, because I say the stuff is very thin. If you put too much on, it will run. Leave it 5 minutes, doesn't take long to dry. Do the same again, so you end up with say 4 passes on it, which is what I've got here. I don't know whether you can see it. I'll try and get the light to shine on it. It's got like a shiny surface, and what that's actually done now is it's sealed the ink on the surface. Now, unlike mine here, which is just a test one for you, here's a colling tip. You're obviously going to spray it on a bigger piece of paper and then cut it out afterwards. Don't cut it as tight on the paint as I've done here. If you do that, think of it like a ham sandwich. You've got bread, ham, bread. Think of the ham as the paint. if you go and cut it like that, you've got the two surfaces and you've actually exposed the paint in the middle. So when you go and wet it, put it on your model, about half an hour later you'll notice that there might be a very slight bleed on the paint. So what you want to do is only a couple of millimetres, but just make sure that you leave a couple of millimetres around the outside of the area that you've inked. Sorry, not painted, the area that you've inked. And that way it won't bleed. Anything else about that? Okay, no. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put it in some warm water. They always curl up straight away. You just put it down flat. They'll usually stay on their own. You don't want to put it upside down, because if you do put it upside down, you'll then have fun trying to get it out. Just get some water over the top of it first, like so. And after a little while, it'll stay there. That's good enough anyway. And you need to let that soak for sort of 3 to 5 minutes. Whilst that's doing, a couple of points, a couple of coloring tips rather for you. Tips, yeah, that's a good one, isn't it? Cotton bud and a cocktail stick, both of them very, very useful when you're positioning the transfers. Next point, just before you come to put the transfer on, wet the surface. Put some water on there. Why? Because you want it to slide on a thin film of water. If you don't, there's a possibility that it might just stick in some places, and that's a recipe for it tearing or distorting when you're trying to move it. Don't worry about there being a little bit of water underneath it. It will dry out afterwards, not a problem at all. And it doesn't have to be sort of perfectly covered. It's just so that when you put the transfer on, it slides. So we'll come back in a second when that's ready to lift. Now my water slide decal has been soaking for 5 to 7 minutes, a bit longer than it would normally take, and that's because my water's gone cold. I needed to use some water that was just a little bit warmer. You may be able to see that it's actually lifted off the backing paper already. So what we're going to do now is we're going to carefully take the whole thing out. We don't want it to come off the backing. Okay, like so. We'll just do away with the water for a minute. We've got our wet surface. Now what you want to try and do is gently move the whole thing slightly off it to the left. It will eventually just go all on its own. There you go. It's starting to move. Just a little bit. What's happening there is that bottom corner is still just sticking slightly. Now it's gone. See, what you don't want to do is you don't want to damage it. They're very, very thin. That's got it. There's an edge of the paper there that's a little bit rough, that's making it difficult to come off. So I'm just going to cut that off. Keep it on the paper. Now, slide the bit off the edge. Think about keeping it in line with the paper. Get it roughly where you want it. Just put a very gentle touch on that end. Hold the paper at the other end and slide it out. Like that. Colin tips. You can use this to try and get out some of the water if you want to, and if you really need to move it, you can always grab some parts of it. Sometimes you can do it by hand look, sometimes you can use a stick, depends how you want to do it. You see, because there's water underneath it, look, I can still move that, but that's exactly where I want it now. Can you see how I cut that too close there, look, and the ink is bleeding under the edge? You know, I'm glad that's happened. I've cut that much too close there. Needed to leave it 2 or 3 millimeters around the edge. Had I have done so, like I've done, for example, the letter V, that one hasn't bled. So that's the key, that's the secret, is to leave yourself just a little bit around the outside edge. Don't be tempted to cut it too close. Once you've got it where you want, just pop down a little bit of tissue, just nice and flat. That's all you need to do. Carefully lift your tissue off, and there you go. As you can see, my letter C, or the bottom letters on that, have bled badly, which illustrates my point. Okay? But as you can see, you do get a very, very good, clean effect with these. And even though it looks a little bit sort of ruffled at the moment, when it dries out, it'll dry out pretty flat. So there you are. Water slide decal. So there you are, YouTubers. Have a go. Not as difficult as you might imagine. Many thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons. And until next time, bye for now.